It happened in front of 300 guests. A slap, sharp and sudden, a sound that cut through the string quartet and the clinking of crystal. My daughter, Sophia, in her custom ivory gown, had just finished her wedding speech, a masterpiece of revisionist history disguised as a toast. And then she walked across the dance floor, her eyes cold and clear, and struck me across the face. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. The air was thick with shock and cheap perfume. And in that suspended silence, a lifetime of illusions shattered. I didn't belong there. Not in this gilded ballroom. Not in the meticulously curated story of their perfect lives. I was a ghost at the feast, a smudge on their pristine portrait. I didn't cry. I didn't raise a hand to my stinging cheek. Instead, I laughed. A low, clear, genuine sound that seemed to terrify them more than any scream ever could. It wasn't a laugh of joy, but of liberation. The truth, it seemed, had finally arrived wearing a Verawang dress and a veil of hypocrisy. My name is Eleanor Croft. I am 58 years old, a widow, and for the majority of my life, I defined myself by one title: mother. I sacrificed everything for my 3 children after their father, James, was killed by a drunk driver. I worked 3 jobs so they could have tuition and tennis lessons. I wore thrift store coats so Sophia could have a designer prom dress. I thought that love was measured in sacrifice. They, it turned out, measured it in dollars and social capital. They said I was embarrassing, that I held them back, that my grief was a burden on their ambition. But I never, not in my darkest nightmare, imagined it would culminate in a public strike from my own child. Yet, as I stood there with the imprint of her hand on my face, I felt nothing but a profound, chilling clarity. That slap wasn't an attack. It was a gift. It was the permission I never knew I needed to stop playing the role of the apologetic, diminished mother and finally speak the truth they had worked so hard to bury. They thought I was broken, a passive victim in the story of their success. They had no idea that for the last year, I had been quietly assembling the pieces of their betrayal. Every deleted email, every forged signature, every secret financial transfer. And with the microphone still humming from Sophia's lies, I decided my silence was over. This isn't a story about a mother's revenge. It's a story about a reckoning. It's about the cost of building your empire on the back of someone you swore to love, and what happens when that foundation finally decides to speak. 6 months before the wedding, I lost the house. The beautiful, sprawling Victorian where I'd raised my children, where James had planted a magnolia tree the day Sophia was born. The bank's notice was cold and final. I called my sons, my voice trembling with a shame I hadn't earned. Liam, I'd begged my eldest, a partner at a prestigious law firm. The foreclosure, is there anything you can do, just to delay it? He sighed, the sound echoing through the phone like a dismissal. Mother, you've been emotionally paralyzed since Dad died. It's time to move on. That house is an anchor. Consider this a fresh start. My younger son, Ben, a venture capitalist, was crueler in his efficiency. Your financial illiteracy isn't my emergency. You should have sold it years ago and invested the proceeds. This is a lesson in consequences. Sophia didn't answer my calls. She sent a text later that day. So sorry to hear. Crazy busy with wedding planning. XX. So I packed 40 years of a life into cardboard boxes. I sold what I could and stored the rest, the family photos, James's old books, the children's artwork, in a damp storage unit I could barely afford. I moved into a studio apartment above a noisy laundromat. The constant thrum of dryers a soundtrack to my unraveling. But I told myself it was temporary, that my children, in their shiny, successful lives, would see my struggle and remember. They would remember the mother who stayed up all night sewing Halloween costumes, who sold her own jewelry to pay for Liam's LSAT prep course, who held Ben through every asthma attack, who listened to Sophia's teenage dramas until the sun came up. I believed in the myth of my own motherhood, and that was my greatest failure. The invitation arrived on thick, creamy cardstock. Mr. and Mrs. Sturley Vanderwoodson request the pleasure of your company at the marriage of their son, Alexander, to Sophia Croft. My name was not on the host line. I was a guest. I was instructed to RSVP online. I bought a dress I couldn't afford, a simple, elegant navy sheath, and took the bus to the venue, a historic estate on the North Shore. My clutch felt cheap against the opulence. Women in couture glided past me, their laughter like wind chimes. I was shown to my table, number 22, tucked behind a massive floral arrangement near the kitchen doors. My seatmates were Alexander's college friends, who spoke of ski trips to Gstaad and art fairs in Basel. I saw my children across the room. Liam, holding court, his arm around a woman I'd never met. Ben, laughing too loudly, surrounded by men in identical suits. And Sophia, radiant, untouchable, floating from group to group on the arm of her new husband, a man whose family owned half of Manhattan. They didn't look at me, not once. The toasts began. Alexander's father spoke of legacy and old money. His best man told stories of debauchery at Yale. Then Liam stood up. He spoke of Sophia's brilliance, her grace, her fierce independence. He painted a picture of a woman who had sprung, fully formed from the head of Zeus. There was no mention of the years I spent helping her with dyslexia, of driving her to speech therapy, of the patient, unglamorous work of building a confident woman. Then Ben stood next. He joked about how lucky Alexander was to be marrying into a family of self-made strivers. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My sons, who I literally made, were calling themselves self-made. Then Sophia took the microphone. She glowed under the spotlight. I want to thank my amazing new family, the Vanderwoodsons, for this breathtaking day. You've welcomed me with such open arms, shown me what a real family looks like. Supportive, generous, steadfast. A few people shifted uncomfortably. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. She continued with a collected speech. Some of you know my own family story has been difficult. After we lost my father, things fell apart. My mother, well, she let grief consume her. She let everything he worked for crumble. She became a victim. The room was utterly silent. She's here tonight, Sophia said, a sad, forgiving smile on her lips. And I love her. But I need everyone to know that the strength I have, the life I'm building with Alex, has nothing to do with the legacy of loss she represents. I've had to rise above it. I've had to build my own family. She put the microphone down to scattered, confused applause, and then she walked toward me. The crowd parted. Her eyes were hard. Her smile never wavered. She stopped in front of me. This is for my own good. For everyone's good, she whispered, so only I could hear. Then her hand swung up and connected with my face. The sound echoed. A woman gasped. A man dropped his glass, and I laughed. I stood up, the weight of 1,000 suppressed truths lifting from my shoulders. I walked to the podium. I picked up the microphone. What a touching speech, I said, my voice calm and clear in the dead silence. Since my daughter has chosen to make this about family legacies, I'd like to correct the record. I looked at Liam. Liam, my brilliant lawyer. When you helped me refinance the house after your father died, you added your name to the deed. You then took out a second mortgage to fund your partnership buy-in. You never told me. The bank has the paperwork. Liam's face went ashen. I turned to Ben. Ben, my financial wizard. The investment portfolio you managed for me? It's empty. You liquidated everything to cover your losses on that failed crypto scheme last year. The statements you've been sending me for the last 18 months are brilliant forgeries. Ben took a step backward, bumping into a waiter. And Sophia, my strong, independent daughter, the generous trust fund your father left for you, you drained it 2 years ago to pay for your wedding planner, your dress, and the down payment on your new apartment, the one you told me Alex's parents bought. I looked out at the horrified, enthralled crowd, at the Vanderwoodsons' frozen aristocratic faces. You all wanted a legacy, I said. This is it. A legacy of theft, lies, and a profound, staggering lack of character. You didn't rise above me. You climbed up on my back, and then you kicked me down and called it ambition. I set the microphone down. The silence was absolute. I didn't look back. I walked out of the ballroom, through the manicured gardens, and into the cool night air. I didn't call a cab. I just walked. The sound of my heels on the pavement, the only thing keeping me company. A car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. It was Margaret Vanderwoodson, Alexander's mother. Her face was stern, but her eyes held a strange respect. Get in, she said. No one should have to walk home in the dark after a night like that. I got in the car. We drove in silence for several minutes. Then she finally said, "They'll try to destroy you. They'll say you're hysterical, unstable." "I know," I replied. "My son, he didn't know," she said, her voice tight, "about the money, about any of it. He's a fool, but he's not cruel." She pulled up in front of my dilapidated apartment building. "What will you do now?" I looked at the dark, uninviting entrance. "Now," I said, opening the car door, "I believe I'm going to live my life." The next morning, I poured myself a cup of coffee in my tiny kitchen. My phone buzzed incessantly. Angry texts, threats from my son's lawyers, pleading voicemails from Sophia that quickly turned venomous. I blocked every number. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. A woman's voice, warm and familiar, answered. "Eleanor, my God, is that you?" It was Clara, my oldest friend from art school, the one I'd lost touch with as I buried myself in motherhood, the one who now owned a successful gallery in Santa Fe. "Clara?" I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "You once said if I ever needed a change of scenery?" "I meant it," she said, without hesitation. "When can you come?" A week later, I was on a plane. I left the storage unit key in the mailbox for my children, let them fight over the fragments of a life they'd already looted. Clara met me at the airport, her arms open wide. Her guest house was filled with light and the scent of sage. For the first time in decades, I slept through the night. I started helping at the gallery. My eye for art, dormant for so long, came back. Clara handed me a brush one day. "Just for fun," she said. The first strokes were hesitant, and a floodgate opened. I painted the grief, the betrayal, the stark beauty of the desert, the startling peace of my new life. 6 months later, we held a small show. Eleanor Croft, New Works. I stood in the corner, watching people I didn't know react to the pieces of my soul I'd splashed on canvas. A couple approached me. The woman's eyes were red-rimmed. "Your work "It's like you reached into my chest and pulled out my own story," she said. "Thank you." In that moment, I understood. My legacy was not what had been taken from me. It was what I chose to create from the ruins. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Prominent lawyer Eleanor Croft named in fraud investigation. Another alert. Venture capitalist Ben Croft's firm implodes amid scandal. I felt a pang of sorrow, not for their downfall, but for the men they could have been. There was no news about Sophia. I imagined her in her perfect apartment, in a marriage now built on the shifting sand of exposed secrets. I put my phone away and looked out at the sunset painting the desert in hues of orange and purple. Clara handed me a glass of wine. "You okay?" she asked. I thought about the slap, the laughter, the long walk into the dark. I thought about the woman I had been and the woman I was finally becoming. "Yes," I said, and for the first time, I knew it was the truth. I am perfectly okay. The family I'd raised was gone, but the life I saved was just beginning, and it was mine. Entirely, utterly mine.